Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praises and glory and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Wakam Kadash. And the Heavenly Father, true name is Yahweh, and His unbegotten Son, Bahashem. In the name of Hamashiach, Yahweh Shai, those are the new names in the ancient Paleo Hebrew, the Lashon Hadash, and I say Barakathon to the elders and apostles. And I say Shalom. And this is a prophecy updates as of January 14, 2026, on this Wednesday afternoon. And this is a news article from as we've been seeing, ongoing tensions heating up between, NATO and the United States. The United States is a led block of NATO. We've been seeing, especially for the past couple of weeks, we've been seeing Nero 47. He's pushing more towards, to purchasing Greenland, which is by Denmark. So you had this news article as of January 14, 2026 from RT.com, or news and reads. It says Denmark to deploy more troops to Greenland. Media reports. It says servicemen from other EU nations are expected to join the Danish forces as the Copenhagen has begun to deploy additional military access to Greenland, amidst the escalation now with the United States over the island. With Danish uh, broadcaster of DR reported on Wednesday, citing sources. It says Denmark has already sent an advance command to the island, and the U.S. President Donald Trump has shown increasing intent on acquiring the territory by any means, right? Even means by deploying troops over there potentially. I believe he said that's not off the tables. But it says in recent weeks, Trump has repeatedly stated that Washington must take possession of Greenland for the sake of the national security, hinting a potential taking the island by force. It says the advance commandment is said to prepare logistics and infrastructure ahead to the prompt by the forces sent by several other European nations, according to the DR. It says while the Danish authorities has remained silent on the matter, the report move has been welcomed. The left wing in Halachinston party, if I pronounced that right. It says this is something we have been requesting over the past week. It is what a wise move. It says, and I understand that the troops from other European countries are on their way to Greenland. It says, and it is right. It says, and it's at the right signal to send any great power that might get a bad idea of attacking Greenland. The spokesperson to the party told DR joint voice aspirations of acquiring Greenland shortly after taking office for his second term and renewed the push in recent weeks. It says the president has claimed that the U.S. control over the island is needed to take, but for the sake of the national security. He also cited that alleged imminent Russia or China takeover of Greenland. The latter claim has been disputed by both Moscow and Beijing, as well as challenges by officials in the Greenland itself. On Wednesday, Trump further elaborated on his rationally behind the push to get Greenland. It says he claims that the island is crucial for creating its purpose, Golden Dome integrated missile defense system. He also suggested that NATO should be leading the way for us to get it, arguing the acquisition will make the bloc far more formidable and effective. It says Copenhagen has only signaled readiness and deepening cooperations with the United States with the NATO framework rather than succeeding. The island pointing out that the populace voted back in 2008 maintains their self-government status within Denmark. And this is bring up that third chapter. As we see a division between the Edomite nations. Now you got Nero 47 wants to purchase Greenland, and then you had Danish troops to deploy over there in Greenland, right along with other European allies to support them. So this will be seeing the division between the Edomite nations, even though they still align with one another. But we've been seeing the division between the Edomite nations, and this is while troops being deployed over there to Greenland, and then from the Danish troops, right, Denmark troops being deployed over there in Greenland, while along with the European troops to help them with the military assets over there in the area as well too. And then Trump is saying that he's going to take it the hard way forward by military force and purchasing at the well at the same time. It says St. Mark chapter 3, verse 24. It says, and if a kingdom be divided against itself, the kingdom cannot stand. Right, so the Edomite nations in modern day are times of the modern day kingdoms, but the Edomite nations are being divided. That's what we're seeing. This is the book of St. Mark chapter 3, verse 25. And if a house be divided, itself, the house cannot stand. Right, so if a house be divided, if a house be divided, itself which cannot stand, that's what we're seeing. In St. Mark chapter 3, verse 26, and if Satan rise up against himself, be divided, cannot stand to have an end. Right, that's what we're seeing. So more division between the Edomite nations, like Dumia, Shashua, he that ways away. And it says again, Denmark to deploy more troops. Greenland, servicemen from other EU nations are expected to join the Danish forces. So that's another sign of the tensions are heating up between the Edomite nations. It says Erdogan slams the Russians' war plan. It says UK police admit of using AI generated evidence to ban Israeli football fans. And this is another news article. As we've been seeing, the protests have been heating up over in Iran, and then you've been seeing the ongoing tensions are heating up between the Israel Defense Force versus Iran, and the United States versus Iran as well too, and the supreme leader of Iran versus the president of the United States, and against Benjamin Netanyahu as well too, because you have the Israel Defense Force and the United States armies potentially doing a second wave of nuclear strikes, which they did back in the last year of June. So it's most likely the scenario is leaning towards that direction. And this is a news article from January the 14th, 2026. It reads, it says U.S. open missiles facilities in Qatar, amending the Iranian tensions. And I remember this, it makes perfect sense as well, too, because you think about it, I believe it's, what was that, I think it was like the pro-Iranian groups used some type of, or the Israel Defense Force, if I'm not mistaken, last year, they did a nuclear strike. Supposedly, you had affiliates of Hamas or Hezbollah, if I'm not mistaken. They did an airstrike over there in Qatar, and then Trump administration mentioned last year that he's going to keep his promise to have more military bases and more facilities, and then continue to have their partnership and alliance with Qatar, their groups over there in that region. It says that the U.S. opened to missile facilities in Qatar amidst Iran tensions. President Donald Trump early signaled the support for protests in the Islamic Republic and threatens new strikes. It says the U.S. has opened new air and missile defense coordination shells at a key air base in Qatar. This is amidst rising tensions with Iran, and President Donald Trump promised to assist protesters in the Islamic Republic. It says in a statement on Tuesday, the U.S. Central Command says that the facilities at the Al Udeid Air Base, if I pronounced that right, it says with houses of some 10,000 troops will be compromised of American and Allied personnel and seeking to enhance the integrated air and missile defense. It says the new sales is also extended to tighten information sharing. It says they're warning and drills and joint response for air and missile defense. It says, and the U.S. official said, it says that rulers reported citing that three unnamed diplomatics that some personnel had been advised to leave the bases by Wednesday evening for the reason. It says the agent noted that measures ahead of the strikes of Iran nuclear facilities last summer, while the Al Air Base came under retaliatory attacks from Tehran at the same time. The moves comes amid soaring present offering symbolic support for the riots in Beijing. Not Beijing, and beginning in late December as over the sharp deval- devaluation of the Iranian world and the sanctioned country, the cost of living crisis, the U.S. president is particularly has urged Iranians to keep protesting and said help is on the way, while also warning of a very strong action in the case of a harsh crackdown on rioters. At the same time, Trump did not rule out talks with Iran, which is, I think, Iran, they open to talks as well too. But at the same time, they open to prepare for war as well too. Is the United States Army. Uh, Iran did not seek war, but was prepared for it. It says the Iranian officials have warned that the neighboring states that host U.S. forces that could face retaliation if Washington attacks. Officials in the Tehran House also insist that the U.S. and Israel has a big hand in the fostering and the current protests. Right, that do make sense because you had like the Mossad of the Israel Defense Force. Mossad of Israelis was there as well too, pumping them up and protesters. It says, meanwhile, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Qatar has privately Washington not to strike Iran, warning that a conflict could trigger several oil markets in the Wall Street Journal reports. Bring out that Matthew's 24th chapter. So these are signs of wars and rumors of wars. So basically, you're definitely going to see that this is going to rise up between Iran and Israel Defense Force. Matthew's 24 and verse 6, and ye shall hear of wars, rumors of wars, right? As we hear wars, rumors, wars. With the ongoing protests taking place over there in Iran, and then got the tensions are heating up once again between Iran and the Israel Defense Force. It says, ye shall hear of wars, rumors of wars, see that you be not troubled, for all these things must first come to pass, but it is not yet. Matthew's 24, verse 7, for nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Right, so we see nation against nation and kingdom against kingdom starting to increase on a daily basis, which goes into ethnos, and there, the Salakia, and there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in diverse places. Right, because we see rising famines heating up over there in the far of Sudan, if I'm not mistaken. And I seen that news article that caught my attention as well too. Which we so used to seeing that over there due to the heavy battles and tensions throughout the years and recently over in Sudan and South Sudan. So it's a potentially rising famine hitting over in the area. Just like what was that like a year and a half ago over there in Gaza? They was dealing with a increasing famine. So these are signs that we're going to see more famines in the world. Pestilence, yep. For nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in various places. So we're going to see more and more the wars, rumors of wars, the nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, the famines and pestilence and earthquakes in various places. And these are the signs that Yahushua spoke about. That's what's going to occur these times. And this is the book of Luke. And Shalom to the Akim or Akbar that's on the comment board. Peace, blessings with your household. And I say Shalom. And Shalom to the elders and apostles while Akim or Akbar as well too. And I say Shalom. And this is all right. Yep, it's the book of Luke 21, verse 25. It says, there shall be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and upon the earth expressing nations with complexity which one. Right, so that's what we're seeing the increasing uptick of expressing nations with complexity which one. As I mentioned again, those protests take place over in Iran, and these different type of seditions and uprisings that we're seeing in our world today. So will continue to increase, and that's what we're seeing. Check. As it says again, U.S. open missile attention to Iran. Hello. Right, check out some more news articles. It says a Trump envoy warns Hamas of serious consequences as administration launched a phase of the Gaza plan. I mean, to be honest, you really should be thinking about speaking to the Israel Defense Force on their side. They the one that keep on breaking the ceasefire, keep using airstrikes over there in Lebanon, hitting over there to Gaza Strip, while they trying to hold on to the ceasefire deal. You still got Israel Defense Force using airstrikes over there in the area trying to mess everything up. Hey, because they the ones they always break peace deals, treaties, ceasefire agreements. Because a lot of times these small hats, these IDF Edomites, they always blame everything on the Ishmaelites, but shit, they do the same thing as well too. It says amending Iran's blackout video shows a lethal violence across the country. Right up most people will bring up that second Edges verse 3. Expect to see those IDF Edomites, they're gonna do unrighteous creeds, especially against those Ishmaelites over there in the Middle East and West Asia. And this is the book of Second Esdras, chapter 9, verse 3. It says, therefore, when there shall be seen earthquakes in the upwards people world, so we're going to see more and more uptick of earthquakes in the upwards people world on a daily basis. It says, a famine. Yeah, this is what I was talking about. This is a famine early warning systems network. It says a famine possibility ongoing in Al Fashar in North Darfur, amending Titan siege. Yeah, that's over there. I believe that's over there in Sudan or South Sudan, if I'm not mistaken. So we definitely gonna be seeing around the world these rising famines are heating up right along with the seditions of other nations. It says U.S. is Britain pulling troops from Qatar. I don't know that. I don't know that made any sense because why would you pull the troops out of there, but you opening bases over there in Qatar from the United States? I don't know how that makes any sense. That's kind of bugged out. It says Yemen's fragile claims of rivals as hunger and many restrictions deepening crisis. Right, so these are more signals that we're seeing in these war torn countries. The famines are increasing. So as it says in Matthew's 24th chapter, we're going to be seeing more and more nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famines, pestilence, and plagues, especially these famines and pestilence that we're going to continue to see increase right along with the wars, rumors of wars, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom that Yahushua spoke about. It says, let's see, check out some great news articles. It says UK military chief ignores Russian warnings of Ukraine troop deployment. Right, because I think France. Yeah, because I thought I heard a car back there for a second. I thought that was like, man, I'm showing somebody. Yeah, it must have been that shot right there. It says the UK chief ignores, right? The UK chief ignores warnings on Ukraine's troop deployment, right? Because it was a deal that was signed. It was like a week and a half ago between the UK and France, I believe, of a potential military deployment over there in Ukraine while the Russia-Ukraine situation continue to still intensify within the area. It says U.S. lawmakers moves to block Trump from invading Greenland. I mean, even if they do have a move on with this, the U.S. lawmakers to block Trump from invading Greenland, hey, he's not going to follow the rules. Hey, I mean, and that makes perfect sense too. What was that like? Almost like 2 weeks now. Like 2 Saturdays ago, he had Maduro. He was captured. He didn't mention that to Congress. He was like, I'm not following no rules. He said, I give it an okay to my Navy SEALs groups and all that to invade this man's country, capture him and his wife. And also, this is what you see Nero 47 unrighteous decrees. And this is the book of Isaiah, chapter, because he's that modern day fierce king. He's that fierce sword, like it says, what's that? Isaiah 19, verse 4. And this is the book of Isaiah, chapter 10, verse 1. It said, woe unto them that are decree unrighteous decrees. Right. Woe unto them that do unrighteous decrees. And that's Esau, Edom, Nero 47. Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees. That right. It says, and that right ungrievous, that which they have prescribed. Yep. It says, turn aside to the needy from judgment and take away right from the poor of my people, that the widows that they may pray, that they may rob the fathers. Right, we see that as well too with Esau, Edom. But definitely Esau, taking resources, taking oil and stuff like that, and saying this is it been stolen from them. So hey, that's the spirit of Esau, unrighteous decrees. Well, I just want to add a sad note to that. Get back to some more news articles. It says U.S. to ends temporary protection status for Somalians. Right, especially with that ongoing, supposedly that the Somalis doing fraud in their country. That's why he had freeze a couple of programs and stuff like that that the Trump administration that froze it was like 2.5 weeks ago, and ever since then, and then you got this protest that's taking place over there in Minnesota as well too. So this is what we see in the uproars. People will continue to increase, and this is Second Ezra's. It's the book of Second Ezra, chapter 15, and Second Ezra 15, verse 16. I'm gonna start at verse 15. Second Ezra 15, verse 15. For the sword and discretion draweth not, and one people should stand up and fight against another with swords in hands. Right, so one people should stand up and fight against another with swords in hands. We know the modern swords weapon. And Second Ezra 15, verse 16. For there should be sedition among men. Right, those protesters over there in Iran. We see in the uproars, people world and the seditions among the nations as well too. For there should be sedition among men as we get closer and closer to the great insurrection uprising. For there should be sedition among men related one another, the nation that regard their kings or their princes, of course, actions stand out. Right, so the citizens as classic as their leaders of power, they're not going to regard their kings or their princes. That modern day kings and leaders and princes in modern day times, and of course, the actions stand in power. So they're going to be taken it to a whole new level as we're seeing. What was so crazy about it is, I think it was like last week, you had a video was circulating around. You had this Iranian protester was using a flamethrower towards the rioters, trying to stop the protesters from protesting throughout the country. And so we're gonna be seeing that a lot more and more in these times, especially the rising protests heating up over in Iran in late December and all into now. So I expect to see those protesters testifying over there in the area, over there in Iran. And this is get to that Matthew's. Yeah, Matthew's 24th chapter. Matter of fact, Matthew's 12 and verse 25. So we're definitely going to be seeing the nation against nation, kingdom before bringing that out. This is the book of Ecclesiasticus, chapter 3, verse 1 reads, it says, to everything there is a season, and a time every purpose in heaven. Right, so for there is a time to seasons, and every purpose in heaven, which is modern day biblical signs and signs of times. So go down to verse 7, verse 8. Ecclesiasticus 3, verse 8, and a time to love, and a time of HATE, and a time of war and time of peace. Right, so we live in the time of HATE and a time of war, so that's going to continue to increase. And this is Jeremiah. Then I'll get to that Matthew 12, verse 25. And this is the prophet Jeremiah, chapter 28, in verse 8. It says, the prophets that have before thee and before thee of old prophesied both against many countries and great kingdoms of war, evil, and pestilence. Right, so we prophesy against great countries, great kingdoms of war, evil, and pestilence. And we see these modern day wars are increasing, the modern day evils and pestilence are increasing. Jeremiah 28, verse 9, the prophet was prophesying peace when the word of the prophet should come to pass. Then should the prophet be known that Yahweh should be sent. Right, so the prophecies are going to come to pass, be filled. It's like the Heavenly Father has truly sent the prophets of old in those times and these modern day times, because the prophecies, they still going to come to pass, be fulfilled. And this is the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, and Habakkuk 2, verse 3. It says, for the vision is yet upon the time of the end shall speak not like every way forward, because we shall become not tarry. Right, so these are prophecies that not tarry, they can come to pass fulfilled. As we see, the prophecies are increasing. And this is we get to that Matthew's, to the book of Matthew, chapter 24, and verse 7. Once again, for nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in diverse places. Matthew 24 and verse 8. All these are the beginning of sorrows, right? So these are very important biblical signs. I'm going to continue to include the beginning of sorrows. And Matthew's 12 and verse 25. And this is the Gospel of Matthew's 12, verse 25. It reads, and Yahushua knew their thoughts were hearts and mind. He said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. Right, that's what we're seeing. Modern day kingdoms are being divided, which that's something will continue to increase, and that's what we're seeing. And this is Matthew's 12 and verse 26. It says that Satan cast out Satan and be divided himself, how should his kingdom stand? Right, so Satan cast out Satan and be divided himself, how should his kingdom stand? And that's what we're seeing. And this is Joel chapter 3 and verse 9. It says, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty man, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. Right, just like spoke about that, it was like 10 minutes ago, about Denmark, Danish of Denmark sending troops over there to deploy that area, that island over there in Greenland, about potential Donald Trump might buy the island, or he might use it by force as well too. Might deploy troops over there, so the intentions of these Edomite nations, especially of NATO, being divided now. So even though they're allies, but it's a division between, especially with the situation that's going on over there in Greenland, that Trump trying to purchase Greenland. Now you got Denmark and the United States being divided over this. Denmark deploying troops over there to Greenland to protect the island over there from Greenland from being bought by or being taken over by military force, potentially from Trump administration. Trump has been speaking about this ever since he got back into office, and ever since for the past 2.5 weeks, he's been having discussions about fully taking over Greenland, buying it as well too. So now you got these tensions are heating up between, NATO and the United States as well too. So these tensions are going to stir up. Joel chapter 3 verse 9, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare for war. Right, so we're seeing these armies of nations divide against one another, and they in that warlike mindset against one another. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war. Right, Gentiles and other nations. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war. Wake up the mighty man, by all the men of war draw near them, come up. Right, as we see rising tensions are heating up between Iran and Israel Defense Force, the pro-Iranian groups going against the Israel Defense Force. You got United States armies versus the Iranian armies. So you got Russia versus Ukraine that's intensifying. You got the division between the European Union and NATO. United States being divided against NATO with this Greenland situation. So we're seeing nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, because you're going to have a nation within itself going to be divided, and then outside of it, another nation being divided because another nation, and then the kingdom within itself going to be divided, and then outside of it, another kingdom being divided because another kingdom. That's what we're seeing. This is Joel chapter 3, verse 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty man. Right, you got tensions heating up between the borders of India and Pakistan, Afghan versus India, Afghan versus the Tajikistan border. It's a dispute situation that been going on for the past couple of weeks. You got China versus Taiwan that's heating up. You got North Korea versus South Korea, Japan, United States that's heating up. You still got tensions heating up throughout the Middle East, which is Western Asia. The Gaza Strip, the West Bank, the Palestinian territory, the Mediterranean Sea, throughout the whole region. These are nations are in that warlike mindset as they slowly but surely get gathered up in the Battle of Jehoshaphat over in Western Asia. It says, Joel 3, verse 10, beat your plowshares and swords and the plenty hooks and the spears, and let the weak become strong. Right, let the weak become strong. These are armies of nations, especially the pro-Iranian groups. Right along, they teamed up with Iran, rising against the Israel Defense Force and against the United States armies. And all these other armies of nations are in that warlike mindset. As I mentioned when I was out there teaching yesterday, I think it was yesterday night, that you had a news article that came out yesterday about the current Trump administration. They labeled the Muslim Brotherhood in these countries like Jordan, Egypt, Lebanon. I believe it's another country as well too. They labeled them as a bad group, bad organization group. Which you what's the T word, which is TEORRORISM, bad organization. So that's gonna rise the dragons of Arabia, which is the Ishmaelites. They're gonna be a wild man, like it says. I think that's it says beat your plowshares and the swords and the plumbing hooks and the spears and let the weak sound strong. Right, let the weak sound strong. That's what we're seeing. Hey, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. Pro-Iranian groups and proxy groups over there in Qatar. Now you got the United States trying to open up military bases over there in Qatar in that region, and then you still gonna have Great Britain and the United States and the Israel Defense Force using airstrikes against the Houthi rebels over there in Yemen. And then you're gonna have the Houthi rebels. They're gonna still be in solidarity with the Palestinians and the proxy groups and the pro-Iranian groups. So they all gonna team up together. They're gonna be going against the Israel Defense Force, especially over there in the Middle East and West Asia. So it's still gonna be a lot of heavy tensions heating up over there. Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, the Gaza Strip, West Bank, Palestinian territory, the Red Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, in different parts throughout that whole region is only going to continue to increase. And all that's going to lead up to the Third World War. And this is the prophet Isaiah. Yeah, this is the prophet Isaiah chapter 17. Yep, Isaiah 17 verse 1, the burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus take away from the city, and it shall be its ruin. Now, ever since then, tension had calmed down a little bit over there in Syria. I expect to see more rising tension heating over in the area because they have a little momentary ceasefire, which was they published, I think it was like last week or like a couple of days ago, like 6 or 7 days ago. But you're still going to have rising tensions heating up throughout that whole region over there in Syria, over there in the Middle East. And this is a future prophecy that we see in the making of Isaiah 17, verse 1 over there in Damascus, in Syria. Isaiah 17, verse 9, it says, in that day shall the strong city be as forsaken as a uttermost branch which they left because the children of Israel, and that day shall be desolate. Right? That land shall be desolate. And that's going to lead up to the Third World War. And this is the book of Ezekiel, right? Because Russia, they still going to be in that warlike mindset. And I think it was a news article saying that the nuclear treaty between the United States and Russia is almost up as of February 6, 2026, because they had that signed that deal back in 2000 during the Bush administration, if I'm not mistaken. So ever since then, they haven't come to any agreement to try to extend the treaty between the United States and Russia, because they it seems like it's getting closer and closer of it being expired, which expired on February 6, 2026. So once that's being expired, if they don't come to some type of solution, that shows that tensions are only going to stir up between Russia and the United States. Yeah, this is from the National News Report. It says the U.S. nuclear arms treaty with Russia is about to collapse. What happened next? Question mark. So we'll read this news article. Then I'll get to that Ezekiel 38 chapter. Now, as we've been saying this countless of times, even though Russia, they are open to dialogue with the Western countries, but in the meantime, they still going to be in that warlike mindset while the Russian-Ukraine situation is heating, while the Russian-Ukraine situation is intensifying. This is Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 4. It says, and I will turn thee back and put into thy jaws, and will bring you forth in all thy army, horsemen, all sorts of armor, even a great couple of bucks shields, all the hand swords, Christ and Russia, they still going to be in that warlike mindset. Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 5. Persia, which is Elam, Ethiopia, the Cushites, Libya, put with all they were shield for him, right? Because Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, they still going to be increasing allies with Russia, because they're going to be fully equipped with armor shield for him. It says Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 6, it says Gomer, right? modern day Turkey. It says Gomer and all his bands, House of Tugma of the North Quarters, all his bands, many people with him, right? Because over there in Iraq and Syria, you're still gonna have the Turkish armies, military bases over there in Iraq and Syria, and they're gonna set their side against the Israel Defense Force over there in Syria. Because Russia is gonna be going to these nations, even though Turkey is allies with NATO, if I'm not mistaken. But the president of Aragon, he played both sides of the fence. Sometimes he's down with NATO, sometimes he's down with Israel, and then now he turned his back. Now he changed his mind. He's against Israel. He condemns Israel. He condemns NATO. He condemns the Western countries. So he got to play both sides of the fence. But definitely, Turkey is going to be an ally, an increasing ally with Russia to go against the Israel defense, especially over there in Syria. And that's why I brought up that Isaiah 17 verse 1. That's a future prophecy of Damascus over there in Syria. Because you're still going to have the Israel Defense Force dealing with multi-front wars over there in the area. They're going to continue to use airstrikes continually over there in Lebanon, over there in Syria, especially particularly over there in Syria, and over there in the Mediterranean Sea as well too. So you're still going to have heavy tensions heating up over there in the area, over there throughout Western Asia. That's add a sad note to that. And this is Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 7. It says, Be thou prepared, prepare for thyself and all thy companies that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. Right, so Russia is going to be a guard to these nations: Iran, Ethiopia, Libya, Turkey, and their main target be going against the Israel Defense Force over there in Syria. Now, with this news article, it says, if the U.S. abandoned nuclear start, says goodbye to that comfortable feeling we once enjoyed, relative freedom from an imminent nuclear holocaust. Holocaust. So it says the U.S. nuclear. Yep, this is from the National. This is from the National, published by Michael T. Clare. As of January 14, 2026, reads, it says the U.S. nuclear armed treaty with Russia is about to collapse. What happened next? Question mark. It says that if the U.S. abandoned the New START, say goodbye to the comfortable feeling we once enjoyed of relative freedom from the imminent nuclear HOLOCAUST. It says for most of us, Friday, February 6th is likely to feel no different than uh, Thursday, February 5th. It will be a work of school day for many of us. It might be a mall shopping for the weekend or an evening get together with friends or any of the many tasks of life. But from a world historical perspective, that the day will represent a dramatic turning point with the far-reaching and potentially catastrophic consequences. It says for the first time in 54 years, it says the world's two major nuclear weapons, right, Russia and the United States, the two nuclear weapons powers, Russia and the United States, will not be bound by any arms control treaties. So will it be legal free to cram their nuclear arsenal with as many new warheads as they wish, especially Russia? It says a step both sides appears to pose to take. It is hard to imagine today, but 50 years ago, at the height of the Cold War, the United States and Russia did the Soviet Union jointly possess 47,000 nuclear warheads. It says enough to exterminate all life on Earth many times over. But as the public fears of a nuclear annihilation increases, especially after the near the death experience of the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, the leaders of those two countries negotiated a series of binding agreements. It says extending to downsize their arsenal to reduce the risk of Armageddon. It says initially rounds of negotiations at the strategic arms limitation talks I began the November 1969, culminated in the first nuclear arms limitation agreement, the SALT I, in May 1972. This would be followed of a June 1979 by the SALT II, signed by both parties, though never ratified by the US Senate. And two of the strategic arms reductions treaty START 1 and START 2 in 1991 and 1993, respectively. Each of these two treaties reduced the number of deployment of nuclear warheads on U.S. and Soviet and Russian, the international ballistic missiles, submarines launch ballistic missiles and long range bombers. It says in the drive, reduce those numbers further. President Obama and President Dmitry Medvedev signed a nuclear treaty, arms treaty, a new start in 2010 on the agreement. It says of limiting the number of deploying nuclear warheads to 1,500 on each side. Still enough to eliminate all life on Earth, but a far cry from start one limit of 6,000 warheads per side, originally set to expire on February 5th, 2021. A new start was extended for another 5 years, as allowed by the treaty, resetting that the expiration date for for February 5th, 2026 is now fast approaching, and this time around, neither parties has demonstrated the slightest inclination of negotiating the new extension. And I remember, what was that like last year? Trump mentioned that he was like, if China and Russia, if they can start their nuclear capability of their nuclear nonsense, he said, why can't we? And I remember he said that. So since since because you had like a nuclear race between, it was like in November, I believe, because I remember that it was between Russia and the United States. So if this nuclear treaty is not extended probably like for another year, because Russia they was interested to extend the nuclear treaty for another year. Now, since both sides haven't even mentioned this, having any agreements about it, as I read it again, it says that the expiration date for the February 6, 2026 is now fast approaching. It says this time around, neither parties has demonstrated the slightest inclination to negotiate a new extension. It says, so the question is, what exactly will happen for a new start expired for the good on February 5th? Most of us haven't given the thought in recent decades because the nuclear, it said because the nuclear arsenals have most part been shrinking, and the bearing threat of a nuclear war, it says amongst great powers, seems to diminish substantially. We have largely escaped the nightmarish experience the veterans of the Cold War era, and fearing that the latest crisis, whatever it might be, it could result in a extermination in a thermonuclear HOLOCHUST. A critical reason for our current freedom for such as fears is that the world's nuclear arsenals have been substantially diminished, and that the two major nuclear powers, right, Russia and the United States, has agreed legally to binding measures, including mutual aspects that the nuclear is meant to reduce the dangers of an incident or incidental nuclear war. Together, those measures were crafted and to ensure that each side would retain invulnerability. The second strike of nuclear retaliation forces eliminating an extensive initiative of nuclear first strike. Unfortunately, it says that unfortunately, those relatively carefree days will come to an end midnight of February 5th. It says beginning on February 6th of next month of 2026, beginning on February 6th, 2026, Russia and American leaders will face no barriers whatsoever to expansions of those nuclear or to any steps that might increase the dangers of thermonuclear conflagration. If I pronounce that right, it says, and from the look of things, both in attendance to size, that opportunity increase the likelihood of Armageddon. It says, like Revelation 11 verse 14, Armageddon, Armageddon 1. It says, Joel 3 verse 9 to verse 10. It says, worse yet, Chinese leaders in Gordon and a like restraint in Washington and Moscow are now building up their own nuclear arsenal. Now adding that further fuels to the urge of Americans and Russian leaders to blow well past the soon to be abound nuclear networks. It says a future nuclear arms race. It says even while they adhere to the new nuclear start limits of 1,500 deployment of nuclear warheads, both Russia and the United States have taken elaborate and costly steps to enhance the destructive powers of their arsenal by replacing older and less capable intercontinental ballistic missiles, the ICBMs. The ICBMs and submarine launched ballistic missiles, SLBMS, and nuclear bombers with power even more capable ones. As a result, each that was always become a better equipped to potential inflicting catastrophic damage on an honest nuclear retaliation. Total forces making the first step less inconceivable and so increasing the risk of potential escalations in a crisis. The Russian Federation inherited the vast of nuclear arsenals by the former Soviet Union, but many of the systems has already become exclusive and reliable to ensure that maintaining that the arsenal, at least at the potent as Washington, Moscow sought to replace all of the Soviet era weapons in its commission, the more modern capable systems, a process still underway. Russia's older SSM-18 ICBMs, for an example, are being replaced by the faster and more powerful SS-29 Surma, while it's remaining the Delta IV plain classic missile carrier submarines are being replaced by far more modern early class and newer ICBMs and SLBMS. It says at the present, Russia possesses 333 ICBM, approximately half of them deployed in silos, and of the half of one world mobile carriers, also 192 SLBMS on the 12 missile carriers, submarines in possession of 67 strategic bombers, each capable of nuclear arms missiles, supposedly.
Good in this. He said, I don't know. I don't know. Isn't this kid? I don't know. Oh, shit. I do what I'm supposed to be. I do what I'm supposed to be. Hey. I do what I'm supposed to be, but I will find out. Who boxes this right here? Who boxes this?
Oh, that's nice for that space that I had. It says, continue on Slovakia. It says, so given that Russia possesses many as 2,600 nuclear warheads in storage, it says it could rapidly increase the number of deploying nuclear weapons in its disposal beginning February 6, 2026. It says Russia has taken enhanced structural capabilities of its strategic arsenal evidence for Moscow driven to augment its existing nuclear weapons by developing a new long-range ones, those including opposite of a nuclear power intercontinental range or giant nuclear torpedo to be carried out by a new class of submarine that rock. It went to hold up six of them repeatedly. Pakistan, Khuzestan, and designed to detonate off the coast of American cities, rendering them uninhabitably uninhabitably following a new rounds of tests now underway. It's scheduled to be deployed by Russia Navy in 2027. Another new weapon, the Avrach, if I pronounce that right, hypersonic glide vehicle is being installed in one of Russia's existing SS-19 ICBMs after being boosted into the space by the SS-19. After should be able to travel more than 2,000 miles, the skirmishing along the atmosphere and other surfaces while evading most missile tracking radars. And so these nuclear races are really going to heat up between the United States and Russia if no deal is if no extending of the nuclear treaty between Russia and the United States. I think starting February 6, 2026, expect to see Russia build up their more of that nuclear capability. And the U.S. going to do the same thing as well, too. And this is Ezekiel 38, verse 4. It says, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. And I will bring thee forth with all the army, horsemen, all of them, clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great couple of shields, all men and swords. Right, so. Hello, Moto. Hello. Hey, hey, Shalom, brother, going thon, yeah, how about you, man? Shabbat rock to you, your household, Shalom. Hello. I'm doing fine. How about yourself? No, don't have it. Ezekiel 38 and verse 5, read that again. It says, Persia, Ethiopia, right? Ethiopia of Cush, Persia of Elam, Libya of Put, all of them shield of Hammon, because you still got military bases from Russia over there in Libya as well too. And then you have recent submarine ships been setting through in the land of Ham and over there with the Kushites as well too, building up their military alliance, economical alliance right along for Iran. Because I think last year or the previous 2 years, we've been seeing long-term deals between Iran and Russia. Because once Trump got sworn into office, I remember that like it was yesterday. Once Trump got sworn into office last year of January, you had deals was making faster between Iran and the United States. I mean, Iran and Russia from a military perspective and economical perspective. This is Ezekiel chapter 38 and verse 5, Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, all the men shield of him. Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 6, it says, Gomer and all his bands, the house of Torgmore of the Lord quarters, all his bands, many people with thee. And this is Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 7. It said, Be thou prepared for thyself and all thy companies that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. Right, so Russia is going to be a guard to Iran, Ethiopia, Libya, and Turkey. They're going to be targeting the Israel Defense Force and the United States armies over there in Syria. And all that's going to lead up to Armageddon, Armageddon of Third World War. And this is the prophet Isaiah chapter 13. Then I'm going to close it out. Yep, so as it says again, read that again. It says the U.S., this is from the National News, as of January 14, 2026, and it reads again. It says the U.S. nuclear arms treaty with Russia is about to collapse, right, which ends on February 6, 2026. It says what happened next. It says if the U.S. abandons the nuclear treaty, start. It says say goodbye to the comfortable feeling we once enjoyed relative freedom from an imminent nuclear H word, which is HOLOCHUST. That's heavy right there. And this is this is Isaiah This is the prophet Isaiah chapter 13 and verse 17. Behold, I will stir up the Medes, right? Russia is the art of Medes, the modern day Medes, rising up against Babylon, because America resembles modern day spiritual Babylon great. The midst of daughter Babylon is sit upon many waters. It says, Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which they should not regard silver, and as for gold, they should not divide any. Right? So as for gold and silver, they should not divide any. So it doesn't matter if the United States uses economical sanctions, oil sanctions, nuclear weapon sanctions. Russia is not going to be phased by that because the Heavenly Father is going to stir up the Medes with the Russians. Isaiah 13, verse 18, it says, Their bows shall be dashed, and it said, Their bows also shall dash the young men into pieces, and they shall have pity of the fruit of thy womb, and their eyes shall spare no children. Isaiah 13, verse 19, it says, In Babylon, the glory of the kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldeans, and excellency shall be as for Yahweh overthrow Sodom and Gomorrah. Yeah. So with that, go ahead and close it out. This was just a prophecy updates. A shalom to the brother Yuanathon. A peace and blessing you or your household. So once again, this was another sit down lesson of the prophecy updates as of January 14, 2026 on this Wednesday afternoon. So with that, I'd like to give all praises and glory and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Wakar Kadash. In the Heavenly Father, the true name is Yahweh, and His only begotten Son, Bahashem, in the name of Hamashiach, Yahweh Shai. Those are the true names in the ancient Paleo Hebrew, the Lashon Kadash tongue, and I say Barakatham to the elders, apostles, or Akim, Akwaf. Until next time, I will say Kwame Sharala and Baba Ball, Shalom to you, brother Jonathan, as always, and I say Shalom, Kwame Sharala and Baba Ball.